Hi everyone, we're just going to give folks about 30 seconds just to join the session. We'll be right back with you. Okay, it looks like folks have stopped joining the session, so we'll make a start. Hello and welcome to our user experience panel. Following on from John's session a little bit earlier on the OpenAthens user experience report, we're going to explore some user experience challenges and good practices. We have a range of questions we've already prepared for our panel, and you as the audience will be able to ask your own questions a little bit later on. As my colleague Michael says, feel free to drop some questions into the Q&A panel as we go, just as you think of them. I'll start with a few introductions. So my name is Emma Wilson-Shaw. I'm the e-resource manager for OpenAthens. A lot of my time spent working with both our library and our publisher customers to champion good user experience. And prior to working for OpenAthens, I worked as a librarian in the UK in universities for about 20 years. I'm going to let our panel introduce themselves. Jane, do you want to take the slide down as well so we can see everybody? Excellent, thank you. Adeline, would you like to go first?
Okay, hello everyone. I'm the information resources at the Swinburne University of Technology Sarawak campus. So I'm actually located in Malaysia. The east side of the Malaysia, so we're basically on the Borneo. So we are the branch campus of the Australian University. Have been with the university for many years, so most of my time and the present roles, I actually develop strategic plans for process innovation, for resource assessment, space management. We are doing big renovation right now. So space is a big thing to us right now. And of course, improvement in technology capability, so on and so forth, constantly enhance the user experience. Yep.
Excellent, thank you, Adeline. Chris, would you like to go next?
Sure, thanks, Emma. Hi, everyone. My name's Chris Chan. I'm the university librarian at Hong Kong Baptist University, which is one of the 8 government-funded universities we have here in Hong Kong. I've been in the UL for about a year and a half, but I've been with HKBU much longer than that, first in information services and later as the deputy university librarian. For most of that period, I've also been a member of our electronic access team. So as the name suggests, we're very concerned about how our users access our e-resources, and we want to make sure that that's as seamless an experience as possible. So I'm really interested to see what my fellow panel members have to say today. Thanks.
Thanks, Chris. Liam, would you like to go next?
Hi, everyone. My name's Liam Ryan. I'm the head of platform for Informit. My background is largely in publishing. So I've come from Oxford University Press many, many years ago. I've also worked with the RMIT University rights department. So I've had some licensing. I then moved over to production of Informit. So for those of you who aren't aware, Informit's sort of an aggregator of Australian scholarly educational resources for researchers, educators, librarians. It was sprung out of a project that was run by RMIT University Library, and we support a broad range of publishers and research centres. So our real function for being is around bibliodiversity. In the last 2 years, we've recently had a platform change, and my role kind of changed as a result of that platform change. And so it's been really quite a fascinating thing to see a lot of the issues around access when we're changing platforms, formats, access points. So there's been a lot of lessons for us, some of them very public in the last 2 years.
That's great. Thanks, Liam. Samir, would you like to go next?
Hello, everyone. I'm Samir Kale. I'm Associate Professor at Birla Institute of Technology and Science. It's a leading private university in India, this part of the world. So I'm associated with a unique program called as Work Integrated Learning Program, where we have nearly 20,000 students offline doing a particular program, and it's widely accepted across the working professionals. So we try to connect with the students in various initiatives of lab, and we have different library initiatives also. So I represent chemical engineering department here and have been associated with this university since last 20 years. So I have a good experience in having what are the difficulties the student face during this resource, during the dissertations, during the projects, during the seminars. So I would be sharing those things. Thank you.
Thank you. Great, Samir. And Derek.
Hello, everyone. Yes, I'm Derek Rowlands. I'm the statewide manager of library services in the Tasmanian Health Service. So the Tasmanian Health Service is the main health organisation in Tasmania. We run all the public health services, such as hospitals, regional health centres, the ambulance service, etc. We have about, we're one of the largest employers in Tasmania. We have about 12,000 full-time equivalent staff and about 20,000 individuals. And so in a population of a bit over 500,000, that's a considerably large organisation. Just over the last year, over 2022, we've had a platform change, and implementing OpenAthens has been part of that change. It's been like a package of different softwares and content that we've put together over that time, and so there have been quite a few changes, mostly positive.
Thanks, Derek. That's great. So we'll move on to our kind of question section. I know we have quite a large panel today, so we've asked folks to raise a hand if they would like to answer a question. Our first question is, what challenges have you seen with user access to e-resources? And we were thinking things around connectivity, technology, access to equipment, language, anything that you can think of that you think you would like to discuss. Who'd like to go first? Okay, as you're on my screen, left to right, Chris, would you like to go first?
No, I think three of us put our hands up at once, but I clicked just a few seconds ahead. A couple of things I wanted to say here. One, and I don't know, well, perhaps this is unique for us. We have quite a lot of students from mainland China. As you may know, they have sort of a different approach to information access there. So during the pandemic, one of the big challenges we have, we at the beginning, a lot of our students were sort of stuck in the mainland, and they had a lot of trouble getting access to our e-resources. And so we had to really scramble with the university's IT department to hook them up with VPNs and things like that. So that was a recent challenge from the pandemic. The second one I wanted to mention, and I didn't mention in my introduction, we are also an OpenAthens institution. We're also the only one of the 8 university libraries that is an OpenAthens institution. So that's given us a lot of challenges with local publishers. Especially, I won't name names, but there's one local publisher which there's a consortial agreement with the 8 university libraries here to get access to their product. And even the other universities, they use Easy Proxy. And even setting up Easy Proxy was like pulling teeth with this vendor. It just took them so long. We don't know why. And well, we have our guesses, but I won't go into the details here. But then you can imagine when we turned around and said, well, we want OpenAthens as well. Their attitude was very different to what you would hope for. Their attitude was sort of, this is something extra that's being asked for. You know, they say things like, well, this wasn't included in the price. And they were sort of saying things like, well, you've got to pay extra. Whereas our perspective is like, hey, you know, this sort of seamless access should be taken for granted. I mean, we really, really need that level of service, especially in this post-pandemic era where that sort of access is simply an expectation, not an added thing that we should be paying extra for. So just briefly, 2 of the challenges we've faced recently.
And Liam, would you like to go next?
Just following on from what Chris was saying, I think the security mechanisms in place, because we're a vendor as well. So in the last 2 years since COVID, we've implemented maybe 3 or 4 different flavors of SAML, so different federations. We know that that's a growing trend. It does take time to set up. So again, we have lots of different institutional settings and capabilities within institutions. So I'm not really talking about trying to defend vendors at all. I'm just saying that sometimes the technical implementation of this takes time, does take multiple parties working really closely together. So we've had integrations with customers that's gone really, really well, very quick. And some that have taken a long time. So I think there is a partnership and an understanding of what is being implemented that is quite important to understand. Some people have an idea of single sign-on being not just a sign-on at an institutional level, but at a personal level. So signing in as your personal profile as opposed to signing in to an institutional to get institutional access. And that is something I would like to kind of I'd like to throw to the people listening in is the changes in single sign-on at an institutional level and the ability for profiles to then have additional services that recommend things to people. Vendors require a bit more information or would benefit from information from an individual. That I think there is a balance here between convenience and privacy. So I think the challenge in that is that we do have different appetites for change, both for vendors, for even some of the major when we've worked with OCLC, for example, their ability to support the product and to support changing technology. So, browsing, redirections, those sorts of things that they are, it's more than one institution that's going to have that as an issue. There's a flow of effects. So I guess that's the issue for vendors is around managing those different variables, and also just noting the increasing concerns around automated use, unlicensed reuse of content as well that we're seeing. So there's a number of issues going on around access, challenges in security and access. Yeah.
Thanks, Liam. It's great to get a slightly different perspective on things. Derek, you have your hand up.
Yes, I'd just like to take up one of the points there that Liam brought up about single sign-on at a personal level. And we were hoping that, once we had a system where we could demonstrate to publishers that, it was very granular, we could have those individual profiles of users and restrict access to materials. To certain categories or groups or locations, that we might be able to negotiate different licensing agreements. We've actually found that not very, just not really possible. Most of the large publishers we've gone to still want a full license fee for our whole 20,000 staff. Even though, only 6 specialist surgeons might be, using a particular product. Most publishers, won't come to the party and bring down the license fee because only a very small number of users are using it. But we're hoping that as it becomes more common, that we get these more granular sort of authentication systems, that that there will be some options like that. But we've been a little bit disappointed so far.
Interesting. Samir, you had your hand up.
Yeah. The main challenge I found when we were in the COVID era, and our institution is an OpenAthens user. So what we implemented here is the access across all the platforms, across all the campuses, across all the remote students, which we call as working professionals. So what our experience is, like, we have to communicate more and more from the institute side. And we have also found the benefits of using the single sign-on. Only one challenge is disseminating that particular information at the user level across using the mobile phone, etc. How it can be accessed easily. So that is one thing which can be done from OpenAthens side. And connectivity wise, there is no issue in India now. The access to the equipments, etc., are also very smooth. The user experience is smooth with respect to the connectivity. And also, if we can include some local content recording, because we have more than 300 courses. So if we can embed that particular thing in the OpenAthens so that it is more accessible. So how to integrate those resources with OpenAthens is one of the challenge from our side.
That's great. That's really interesting. Thank you, Samir. And last but not least, Adeline.
Yeah, hopefully I'll just add on from where I'm coming from. I think internet connectivity, that's everybody encountered that, things like that. But from the point of our views here in Sarawak, or specifically for from Swinburne itself, I think that the access to the electronic resources sometimes have too much information retrieved. The researcher, the learners has difficulty sometimes at identifying those relevant information that is one, and also that I think one most important part, I think, is also lack of instructions. I think those literacy skill, things like that, people just love to use Google. So, another questions that we always ask is, we have been promoting our resources, even like through our website, things like that. But, students just love Google, that's one way that we're seeing it. And I guess paywalls is also one of the way that sometimes students just not continue using our subscription, things like that. Yeah. So skipping away from the library portals, I guess. Yep.
Thanks, Adeline. Yeah, that seems to be a really common experience we found in our research as well. What I will do is maybe move us on to another question for us all to take a look at. Let's take the question. So what role can a library or your organization play in improving user experience and access to resources? Adeline, would you like to go first?
Okay, so from what I have explained earlier in regards to literacy, instructions, things like that, the one thing that we just moved from IP, Easy Proxy to OpenAthens. Love it, love the products, but of course there's more to learn. So another thing that we have in plans right now is to significantly actually improve resource discovery, okay, to find more ways to bring more richness in regards to our to the products that we actually subscribe, and of course our library. We are also doing research, or we are also doing a little bit of studies right now to study user patterns or user journey on how can we actually help to shorten their resource discovery. So previously there's a lot of, there's a lot of clicks, things like that, one way to another. So we will try to learn and study students' behavior and try to actually promote and help and see if we can actually reduce that journey to resources. And of course, I think like deep linking is one way to help it. There's some more streamlining of some of our maintenance and housekeeping of our resources. That's one way that we're currently doing.
All sounds really exciting. Thanks, Adeline. Chris, would you like to go next?
Sure, thanks, Emma. Just building on a point that Adeline made, students love to use Google, and it might be a bit naive to think that we can certainly convince 100% of them to switch and start using the library search tools. So one thing we've tried to do is kind of respond to that and try and be where they are, right? So we are a LibKey Nomad library. I think I saw in Derek's presentation on your screenshot of your homepage, you also have this tool. And I think Lean Library does something similar. So the idea of a browser extension where, doesn't matter where they're browsing, they sort of say, well, I'm from HKBU Library, and whether on the publisher's website or even in a Wikipedia article or PubMed, if we have the full text, there's just a link, that just pops up, and that will take them into OpenAthens for the authentication. So the user doesn't have to worry about, well, does the library have it through an aggregator or whatever, and it can even link them through to our interlibrary loan services. So I'm pretty excited about the potential there of making it smoother. Of course, you still have to convince them to install the extension. There's still a little bit of something they have to do, but if we can get it on there, I think that would help a lot. Yeah, thanks.
That sounds really great. Thanks, Chris. Samir, would you like to go next? Oh, sorry, you're muted.
Yeah, sorry. The user experience at my university seems to be good. Inferent, after the introduction of SSO, they are using quite of OpenAthens, but the urge to use Google has been at the forefront. I can observe from the dissertation thesis, etc. So how to overcome those thing and focus on the OpenAthens content or the research content is something which we are targeting. So our library services have been installed in all the 3 campuses and the off campuses, and they are working and communicating the same to the student and urging them to use more of OpenAthens platform rather than using Google, etc., for the dissertation. So that is some initiatives taken by the library.
That sounds great. Thanks, Samir. And Liam? Oh, you're also muted, sorry.
Sorry about that. Just to talk about some of the traffic that we see, and we work quite closely with discovery services, and we work with people like Primo and EDS and WorldCat. We also work quite closely with Google and Google Scholar in terms of their CASA program, which provides, so I think one of the important things is we are going to see users in the wild wanting to use content that institutions have spent a lot of money to provide access. So what we're seeing with some of the relationship with Google is that you are able to, if we're able to work with their CASA program, what we can do is put the linking on the Google Scholar and Google itself, link through and use the subscription that institutions have by providing subscriber data. So that does happen if you can get that to work well with your institution. Your users, if they've logged in via your IP or single sign-on in a 3-month period, or a 6-month period, or depending on the institution's settings, you can then allow your users to flow through your access through to the vendor. So there is some benefits there in terms of reaching out to users in the wild. I don't think a user is really concerned about how they get to the content. They just want to get to the content. I think the issue for many education institutions is you want to show your benefit. You want to show why it is so important that they study where they study, or they work where they work. So I think that's a really important part, is the access should be enabled, and as much as possible, to some degree, the user should be aware of how they got to where they got to and why they're getting full text access, because otherwise that's going to change. That sense of benefit or value is going to change, and I think that may change increasingly in an open access world. So there's some interesting kind of transitions here in the model of access and licensing.
Great, thanks, Liam. That's really informative. Chris, did you have a follow-up?
Yeah, so just to tag onto something Liam said there about why they're getting access. That's one thing I like about LibKey Nomad. When they are linked to the full text, a giant logo of the library is displayed on the screen for about 5 seconds. So they have no illusions of why they're getting the full text through their library. Yeah,
that's great, Chris. Yeah, I agree. It's beautiful.
And Derek.
Yeah, I was just going to say a little bit more about what the library can do in this situation, and the various things that people have brought up, like LibKey Nomad, and OpenAthens and Google Casa. There isn't sort of the awareness in the IT departments about these sort of services, and you've got to explain it and sort of advocate and try and persuade for these to be implemented. But once people are aware of these things, they can see the benefit. And I'm thinking back to Easy Proxy. I used to be an academic librarian about nearly 25 years ago, maybe. We were having the issue of subscribing to our first electronic content, and trying to solve the problem of access for students and staff off-site. And Easy Proxy was really the only option out there, but there was still resistance amongst people in IT, because they didn't know about it, didn't really know what it did. But once we persuaded them to implement it, they thought it was great and actually started to use it for other authenticating against universities' other resources, not just the library's resources. So I think library being an advocate for these newer technologies is very important.
Definitely, and yeah, the kind of the partnership with your IT team is, I think, essential for a lot of these things to work. Sorry, a little bit croaky. What I will do is maybe move on to maybe another couple of questions. We've got a little bit of time. Probably, actually, no, this is one for everybody. How does your library or organization provide training or support to your users to do their research? Adeline, would you like to take that one?
Okay, probably just a little bit of sharing. Recently, once that we have actually moved from Easy Proxy to OpenAthens, we have also met some structures to our instructions. We used to have some modules that is available via our learning management system. So we have actually revamped that whole thing again, from 3 modules to actually 10 modules this year, in bite size as well. So each module we have a little bit of quiz, things like that, where the students or the research will be able to understand what they have learned. So that's what we do. So we thought that is a little bit of support and training that the researcher and learners could learn at their own pace. Yep.
That sounds great. Does anybody else have anything to share about training or opportunities that their institution offers? I'll move us on to another question. Okay, great. One for everybody. How do you think that maybe libraries or librarians and publishers could work together to improve access to resources? Liam, would you like to take that one first?
Yeah, so I think the partnership between librarians and publishers can be closer than it currently is. And I think Derek's kind of referenced a few, one of the earlier comments that he made about licensing and publishers and inflexibility of publishers in some cases to negotiate positions with libraries. Certainly, I think that's that's going to be an ongoing sort of conversation around how do we recompense content creators appropriately for the content that they create. And I think there's lots of conversations about that. So I think the open access movement is going to be something that we do need constructive conversation in. And I think we're coming to a point where that transition for particular industries, so for Informit, we work predominantly in the humanities and social sciences. That is a very different arrangement for open access than, say, straight STEM. So I think for us, I think these kinds of industry events, it's really important to hear from users, from customers, from vendors, to say, well, what is the perspectives that we might strike, and what are some of the the areas that we can really more closely collaborate on. For publishers, I think we need to continue to listen to librarians. We need to listen to users. So we need your help to be the best that we can be, and by listening to that feedback, good and bad, it helps us to develop better services that meet the need of the users that we are in. We need to invest in the services that we use, and that in that feedback is really important for vendors to shape out the services that benefits all of our community. And I think too, just developing, often it's not just one relationship that we need to develop. We need to develop relationships between like publishers, users, and often technology vendors. So that three-way conversation needs to happen to make the best out of, to quickly troubleshoot issues, to better develop services that serve the community. So I think it's a lot of it's about collaboration and relationship building.
I agree there. Yeah, definitely. Chris, would you like to go next?
Thanks, Emma. Yeah, just want to agree 100% with everything that Liam's just said there about partnerships and working together, librarians, publishers, and other stakeholders. And just, I think you mentioned before, Liam, that there is a process there for the publishers as well, because sometimes I know I have been frustrated on occasions. You're like, well, why can't it just work? Why? Because this publisher can do it. Why can't you do it? And that's often not constructive, right? We have to understand that every organization is different, and it's not just flipping a switch or anything like that. So that sort of like you said, relationship building and that mutual understanding is important. Open access as well, just to build on what Liam said there. HKB, we have several transformative agreements kind of underway. And yeah, we definitely need to keep talking to our publisher partners about making that more streamlined and making sure we can get things like information. Because one thing that's come up recently is, well, we need to know how often the articles that we've paid for have been downloaded. And we've just been doing that ad hoc, right? Because that's okay when you have one transformative agreement and there are 10 articles, we can have someone just count those up. But, over time, we have more TAs, we have dozens, hundreds of articles, we can't easily get those sorts of figures. So yeah, working together to figure that out as well. And the last thing I wanted to mention is just, I think this point was made earlier by another panel member, publishers working with discovery services. So just referencing the OpenAthens report that has it been released or I don't know, I was able to read it. So one of the points that was made is like students, researchers, they want one place, right, to discover everything. And discovery services have come a long way. Here's a regional perspective. There's a major vendor well, I guess I have to name names here, CNKI in China, and they just don't want to play ball at the moment with discovery services, which creates big problems for us. And we made a decision to sort of switch them off in our discovery service, and we had some negative feedback from our users, kind of supporting what the OpenAthens report says, that like they want one place to search. They don't want to have to go to different databases. But if the metadata that they're providing to the discovery service is not good enough, that creates a lot of problems for our researchers. So yeah, just a few thoughts.
Yeah, it's great, Chris. Thank you very much. I'm going to come to probably our last question of our prepared questions. Let's go to what's next for your organization? What are you doing next in this kind of user experience space, improving access? Anything like that? Liam?
So we're building a strategy underpinned by some of RMIT University's wider strategy, but Informit has really have to credit our director Emma Juniper and our head of product Lucky Sidiris, but we're really building around re-establishing our community, so working with publisher partners to support some of the the diversity that we're looking to continue to support in this in our local context. I think that's something that we do need to consider, is that in some cases some of our publishers are not necessarily set up entirely to do authentication, discovery services. They're not set up to do counter reporting. All of that kind of stuff takes a lot of effort and often a lot of infrastructure costs. So that's one thing that we are trying to support, a wider variety of publishing rather than it all falling into some of the bigger publishing heads. And that's something that, so research centers and things like that really need some, some support. So we're really looking to amplify our community. One of the things that we are also looking at in terms of product development is how our content and service can be used to build critical thinkers. So again, going to, what does a user, what's their context? How do they come to our platform? How can we support them? So we've started really from a research and scholarly point of view, but we're seeing that is really great for librarians and researchers, but student users have a different journey. And so what we're trying to do is, provide a context for them that makes access to the content, entry points to the content about their level of understanding and not necessarily the academic nature of, say, a literature review and citation. So getting that balance between detail and an access point and contextually providing those pages, which is why user profiles comes back into the fore for me in terms of, how do we allow people to present their user profile while still maintaining privacy. So those two things go together, privacy versus convenience. One other thing that we are doing is looking at the UI for improving login and pathways for pay-per-view, if that's the way that people have access. So institutional login improvements, so that we're making sure that guest users are aware that they can log in via their institution, or they can get access via pay-per-view. So we would really want to make that user journey a little bit clearer on our platform, because we see from some of our sort of usability studies of current behavior on our platform that is still an issue for guest users.
Yeah, I can imagine. Definitely. If nobody else wants to take that question, we do have a couple of questions from the audience, which actually kind of follows on from what you've been saying, Liam, actually. The first question is, how valuable is personalization, for example, safe searches within a platform, contextual content delivery to your users? And should libraries and publishers invest money in developing these services? Derek, would you like to answer the question?
Yes. Well, I think the two things are quite related. I'm thinking of some products that we have that are clinical tools that our staff can use anonymously if they wish to, and still get some valuable information from. But if they are willing to give some of their information to the vendors, that can be personalized to a considerable extent, and they can save searches and build up a library of materials or articles or whatever, and even start getting some professional development points in some cases. So we in the library, we of course value people's privacy, and we get to try and make people aware of what it is they're giving away. We hope that the vendors we sign up with are transparent in how they use that data, and we certainly wouldn't really want to contract with anyone who on-sells data, for instance. But we just feel that we need to really know what those vendors are doing before we can recommend to our staff that yes, it's okay. You can sign up for a personal account with A or B, whatever.
Yeah, sounds very sensible. Liam, did you want to follow up on that?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I completely agree with the privacy policy part of Derek's answer. I think it's really important to get an understanding of the appetite of an institution. So that's one question that I do have. I'd be actually interested to hear from some of the other the other panelists and even some of the listeners about the choices here at an institutional level. So at the moment, for example, in Informit, we have, when we do SSO, we sign in at an institutional level. So we know that it's a guest of that institution, that you get the license access from that institution. And really, it's an anonymized service in terms of we can see the searches, but we don't know who's done them. We can see the downloads and we can report on that. So there's some really useful analytics that we can pass back to the libraries around generalized use. But things like services, like we have media on Informit, in order to use some of the additional services like clipping or reading lists or favorites or providing contextual pages or even recommending content based on your behavior, that then obviously needs a profile, and I think there should be an option as to whether you have that or not. But for some institutions that might be very valuable, and others they may have a very different idea of what it is that they're getting from the service. So I think that's an interesting sort of change in you look 20 years ago and nobody wanted mobile phones to track them, and now we're all there's a lot of people who are quite comfortable with that. The idea of a changing idea of what is private, what is private, what data you're willing to hand over that relates to your academic or learning outcomes is very different. So again, I think to answer that question, it's very valuable to vendors because we can provide services. We can actually start to provide recommendations to you, things that we think that you might then get benefits from. We can surface content that we think the user might be interested in. And that's a great thing for user access. The downside is that there's potential, as Derek was saying, there's potential for abuse. And certainly for Informit, we have a very strong privacy policy. We only collect information that we need to provide our service for. There's certainly no on-service provision of that data. But again, it is users' data. So again, we need to allow, we're compliant with GDPR. We also need to make sure that we allow users to manage their own data that we're holding. So that's an important part of the user profile within our platform as well.
That's great. Thanks, Liam. There's kind of a follow-up question which we've partially answered. It's just around who is responsible for maintaining user privacy. Does the responsibility lie with the library, the institution, the publisher, or the user? I think so far it's been a combination of all, but if anybody wants to answer that question, that would be great. Chris, though, thanks.
Oh, yeah, I agree with you, Emma. I think it's everyone, right? Privacy is everyone's responsibility. But I think what we need to, maybe as from the library's perspective, maybe from the publisher's perspective too, is just to communicate to our users what is actually happening when they agree, or when they create an account, or when they log into a certain service. So I think, again, linking it to the previous question, there may be value. I mean, but each individual user needs to make an informed choice, right? Like, do I want to provide my attributes or release my attributes to this service, and in return I will have access to this functionality? So it's an incredibly complex question. I don't think we'll be able to provide the definitive answer here in the next 2 minutes, but yeah, all four, and to a varying degree depending on the situation. That's a great non-answer that I've just given there.
That's great. Thanks, Chris. We're actually at time, so I'd like to thank all the panelists for coming today. It's been a great session. I'll leave it there. I hope you have a great day. And there's a wrap-up session coming up with John just shortly. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.